Hey everybody, welcome back to day 3 of the Ravnica Allegiance set review on the Mana Leek. I'm John as always, and today we're going to be taking a look at all of the black cards in Ravnica Allegiance. Of course, from a limited perspective, keep in mind we're not talking about constructed. Keep in mind these are my first glance reviews. They may change over time. And of course, keep in mind that I'm doing this to get discussion going. I'm not here to tell you the absolute truth. Now, just before we jump into the set review, I do want to do something very exciting here and talk about Inked Gaming for a second, and how you can get a free playmat. You might know I'm an Inked Gaming affiliate. Use the promo code MANALEEK10, all one word, 10 is the number, to get 10% off your order at Inked Gaming, but I am now an Inked Gaming sponsored affiliate, which means I get more support from them, and I work more closely with them, which can also mean some more giveaways for you guys. So if you go over to twitch.tv/themanaleek and you check out my stream on January 17th, where I'll be playing Ravnica Allegiance, as it will have come out on both mtgO and mtgRNA. I don't know which one I'm going to play it on just yet. You will get a chance to win a playmat. If you haven't checked out my streams before, we do marble races during the streams. Marble races are basically a fancy way of doing a randomized giveaway. We actually play them for fun and keep track of points with the leaderboard system, but I also do use them when we do giveaways. So we'll be doing a Marble Grand Prix, which means for everybody who is there that day, we will do a series of races, and the overall point total winner will get themselves a playmat. So go check that out, twitch.tv/themanaleek on January 17th, and go check out Inked Gaming and use the promo code MANALEEK10 if you do buy something there for 10% off your order. But on to the first black card today, we have Awaken the Erstwhile. Awaken the Erstwhile is 3 black for a sorcery at rare. Each player discards all the cards in their hand, then creates that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. No, you have next to no control over how many cards your opponent will have in their hand, and if they have too many, this is just a dead card in your hand because you're not going to cast it. In fact, if they have more than you, you're probably just never going to cast it because they get more zombies. And what's your plan? What's your plan here? Don't play your cards just to get 1 or 2 or 3 extra 2/2s? No, this card is bad. This card's an F-. You should very actively never play this card. F- for Awaken the Erstwhile. Up next is Bankrupt in Blood with incredible art. Bankrupt in Blood is 1 and a black for a sorcery at uncommon. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice 2 creatures. Draw 3 cards. So it's a slightly cheaper Blood Divination mana-wise, but it costs a second creature. Apparently, Blood Divination was too good, I guess. Actually, it actively would have been too good in this set with Afterlife. Obviously, if you do sacrifice 2 Afterlife creatures, this will leave you with 2 spirits and draw 3 cards, which is really, really good. You could also steal a creature and kill it if you have a threaten effect, which we'll see later is kind of cute. Obviously, the card's grade changes based on your deck. If you are taking advantage of it by stealing creatures or sacking on death trigger abilities like Afterlife, this is probably like a C+, or maybe even a B- if you're definitely gonna do that every time. But if you're just sacking 2 of your normal creatures, this is not that good. So this really ranges from like a B- if you are certain you are going to take full advantage of Afterlife with this, and like a D- if you don't. So D-, B- for Bankrupt in Blood. Up next is Blade Juggler. Blade Juggler is 4 and a black for a creature human rogue at common. It's a 3/2. That says when Blade Juggler enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to you, and you draw a card. But there's a little bit more here. Spectacle, 2 and a black. Spectacle is Rakdos's mechanic. It says that you may cast this card for its spectacle cost rather than its mana cost if an opponent lost life this turn. Losing life is any sort of life total change. It could be paying life, losing life, or most commonly, taking damage. Hitting them with a creature is them losing life. So if they have lost life this turn, you can cast this for 3 mana. So if you spectacle this, it's a Phyrexian Rager, which was a totally solid card. 1 life doesn't matter. A card is worth way more than 1 life. At 5 mana, this is way less good. The body is garbage for 5 mana, and even a card draw at 5 mana is looking like not quite enough for me. All in all, I think I hold on to this until I can definitely cast it for 3, or I just literally have nothing else to do with my mana. So I think you can probably play this a lot of the time. I'm not going to go up to C+, which is kind of my always play grade. I am going to keep it at C. I think there are some times where you'll just have too many better cards. So C for Blade Juggler. Up next is Blade Brand. Blade Brand is 1 and a black for an instant at common. Target creature gains Death Touch until end of turn. Draw a card. This is really decent. As long as you're attacking or your opponent is attacking you, you have pretty cheap removal that replaces itself. It's awful if you're creatureless. So is a lot of things, but it can still be cast. You can cast this on your opponent's creature and draw a card. That's a horrible doomsday scenario, but you could do it. It's probably a very strong C+, and I think I'd generally be very happy with the first one in my deck, and arguably even the second one. You're always wondering, is somebody going to hit you with an instant speed Death Touch trick? And usually the answer is no, but now the answer is yes, and they always have it. Strong C+ for Blade Brand. Blood Mist Infiltrator is up next. Blood Mist Infiltrator is 2 and a black for a creature vampired uncommon. It's a 3/1. Whenever Blood Mist Infiltrator attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, Blood Mist Infiltrator, it's hard to say for some reason, can't be blocked this turn. It's a free-ish sack outlet, which is nice. You have to attack with it, which is a cost, but it's unblockable if you sack, which means that the attack is probably fine. Anyways, you get a 3/1 that's unblockable when you sack, which is great. Also, it says non-token, which is awesome, so you can sacrifice your Afterlife creature, get a token, get in for 3. Sacrifice your Afterlife token next turn, get in for another 3. It does require a little bit of a build around for you to have those Afterlife creatures or creatures that you want to sack, but I think this is actually pretty decent and will go very well in the Aristocrats deck that we'll see relatively soon. Definitely exists. So I've got this at a strong C+, maybe even a B-, especially if you are in that sack deck. So let's actually just go with a B- for Blood Mist Infiltrator. Up next is Carrion Imp. Carrion Imp is 3 and a black for a creature Imp at common. It's a 2/3 flyer. When Carrion Imp enters the battlefield, you may exile target creature card from a graveyard. If you do, you gain 2 life. It's a 2/3 flyer for 4 that conditionally gains me 2 life, which is kind of strange for black. Obviously exiling from a graveyard, but that could very easily be flavored into white. Anyways, it's fine, but it feels very filler with not much upside going on here. I don't think I can go any higher than a C here. Play it, cut it. It's really kind of the same to me either way, I think. Just a C for Carrion Imp. Up next is Catacomb Crocodile. Catacomb Crocodile is 4 and a black for a creature crocodile at common. It's a 3/7, and it's got some good flavor text, and that's about it. It's going to be obnoxious. I'm never going to want to play this card, and it doesn't do anything. It just blocks, and it stops X3s from attacking. Cool. It's super defensive if you do want to be that deck, but the cost isn't that bad. Realistically, it's probably like a C, and I think in some decks it's even like a C+ if they're desperate to go late game and they really need to not die to Rakdos and Gruul. But like my usual kind of explanation about walls and why I don't think you should go too deep on them or grade them too highly is because they still only block a creature. You can still go around them. You can still go over them. So realistically, this for me is just going to live in the sideboard 100% of the time. I'm going to have it as a D+. If you find out that you're dying to aggro or you really need to not die to aggro, then certainly this can go in. But I don't think you main deck this, and I don't think it's that great. So D+ for Catacomb Crocodile. Up next is Clear the Stage. Clear the Stage is 4 and a black for an instant at uncommon. Target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you may return up to 1 target creature from your graveyard to your hand. This is just fine enough removal, even if you don't have big toughness creatures, primarily due to the instant speed. It is a little costly, sure, but it still will kill a good amount of the format. And if you do have Ferocious turned on, recovering a creature basically for free is awesome. This is probably in the first pick conversation in packs that are lacking premium removal or a bomb, and I think most black decks would absolutely love the first copy and maybe even the second. I think Clear the Stage is just a pretty easy B for Clear the Stage. Up next is Consigned to the Pit. Consigned to the Pit is 5 and a black for a sorcery at common. It says destroy target creature. Consigned to the Pit deals 2 damage to that creature's controller. And immediately following Clear the Stage, I can't help but think this is somebody like jumping into a pit to crowd surf or something. Anyways, this is fine. It's a slightly easier to cast Sip of Hemlock, which was 4 black, to do exactly all of this. But this is our removal that we get these days. This is our common removal. It's expensive. We'll complain about it, and we'll still play it, and it will still be good. It's unconditional removal. It's arguably premium despite the cost. Maybe don't load up on multiples of these unless you are a super late game deck, but the first one is totally fine. B for Consigned to the Pit. For the first one anyways. The second one is a lower grade. Up next is Cry of the Carnarium. Cry of the Carnarium is 1 black for a sorcery at uncommon. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. Exile all creatures in all graveyards that were put there from the battlefield this turn. If a creature would die this turn, exile it instead. Well, here's the -2/-2 effect of the set. I do feel like it's been like at least a couple of sets since we've had one. Anyways, it's a pretty weak Wrath, and the exile clause doesn't really seem that important. There's no, obviously Jumpstart's not on creatures, there's no undergrowth, there's no real graveyard stuff going on in this set that much, so it doesn't really seem that important. I would leave this in your sideboard as a sideboard card, only because it's really not going to help you out against Gruul or Simic, so there will be games where this card is dead or even just hurts your own deck more. So sideboard only for me, and it's not one that I think is that great. So D for Cry of the Carnarium. Up next is Dead Revels, a card obnoxiously close to a Rakdos card from Return to Ravnica. Dead Revels is 3 and a black for a sorcery at common. Return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand, and you can spectacle it out for 1 and a black. You know me, if not, hi. I avoid this effect unless it's very efficiently costed or has something else going on with it or is free. A 2 mana version of this is very efficiently costed, but I would want to be aggro to guarantee that I'm dealing damage to make sure Spectacle is turned on, at which point I think I kind of just want more creatures to draw rather than drawing my creatures that have already failed to get through for damage, because typically I'm going to be bringing back 2/2s, 2/1s, little aggro guys that get worse and worse and worse as the game goes on. This is definitely better than I'm going to grade it, just because I don't tend to go out of my way to play these cards. I don't care for the 4 mana version of this card, but I do relatively like the 2 mana version. I'm going to start this at a C. Most people will play this and like this at a C+, and it maybe is a little bit more like a C+, but let's start Dead Revels at a C. Up next is Debtor's Transport. I hate the art. It's gross. Debtor's Transport is 5 and a black for a creature thrall at common. It's a 5/3 with Afterlife 2. It's a big, dumb 5/3, which I hate playing, especially for 6 mana. But when it dies, which it will, because hello, you put 6 mana into 3 toughness, that dies to a lot of things, you get 2 spirits. I'm really kind of mad at how much better Afterlife makes bad creatures. This is, I think, begrudgingly playable. 6 mana is still so much to ask for, though. No, you know what? For 6 mana, I need way more than a 5/3 that dies to everything and is technically just going to be a 2/2 a lot of the time, even though a flyer. I can't see this making my decks basically ever. I'm going to go with a D+ on Debtor's Transport. Even if I'm doing like some kind of wacky, and it's actually not that wacky, Aristocrat Sacrifice deck, I would infinitely prefer other creatures to sack than this. So I'm going to go with a D+ and watch it end up actually being like a B- or something. D+ for Debtor's Transport. Up next is Drillbit. Drillbit is 2 and a black for a sorcery at uncommon. Target player reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards their card. It's Thoughtseize, but 3 mana. But Spectacle, single black mana. If your opponent has lost life, this is Thoughtseize without taking 2 damage. Now, Thoughtseize is an incredibly powerful, very important constructed card. It's actually not that good in Limited. Even actual Thoughtseize in Theros, I didn't really ever play. It's just not good. I picked it, of course, for value, but it was never very good in a deck. These effects are really good in Limited, though in Best of 1, and this is something we haven't really talked about yet, Best of 1 is a totally different format on Arena. Totally different. You do some really different things on there than you do in Best of 3, and this is really talking about Best of 3. Almost all of this review will be very, very helpful for you. But a couple of things do get better in Best of 1. So for example, Drillbit, I might play in Best of 1 because you've got one chance against your opponent to not let them get their bomb or to luck out and not let them hit their big thing. And it's a very different way, and it's not a way that I like to play Magic, which is why I'm very against the best of one thing. But if you are playing best of one on Arena, some of these cards might get a little bit better. Keep that in mind. I'm not going to talk about it very much in the rest of the review, but I kind of wanted to talk about it here. But back to best of 3. At 3 mana, this is just not something I want to pay for, and at 1 mana, it's okay, but you don't have great control over when it's going to be 1 mana, and yeah, there's no reason to play Thoughtseize style effects, so D- in limited, just not something I want to play in best of 3. D- for Drill Bit. Up next is Font of Agonies. Font of Agonies is a single black mana for an enchantment at rare. It's time for another one of these, I guess. Whenever you pay life, put that many blood counters on Font of Agonies. Pay 1 and a black, remove 4 blood counters from Font of Agonies. Destroy target creature. Well, those are awesome words, but you want to know a little secret? There are 6 cards in this entire set that allow you to pay life. 5 of those are shocklands at rare. You're not going to have those in your deck. Blah, blah, blah. Disclaimer. Yeah, somebody somewhere at some point will have 1 or maybe 5. You're not going to. The other one is a common, which is really good, by the way, in which you pay 5 life. But you're still going to have like 1, maybe 2 of those in your deck. Which means if you have this card and that one exact card, that one exact single card, and you draw and play this first before you draw and play the other one, and you pay 5 instead of paying the other cost that it has, which is certainly better, then you get to activate Font of Agonies. That's horrible. This is an F. This is an F+. That's how degrading and awful this card is. It is unplayable. Do not play this card. F+, F+, F+. Into not an F+, we have Grotesque Demise. Grotesque Demise is 2 and a black for an instant at common. Exile target creature with power 3 or less. It's Vanquish the Weak from Ixalan, except exile instead of destroy, which is a very big increase, especially with all of the afterlife that's running around in this set. This is super, super, super good. Vanquish was amazing. This set has kind of similar-ish power and toughness. It hits so much of the format. This should be absolutely fantastic, and every black deck is going to want every copy they can get of this. I would play up to a play set of these, maybe even more if I could. If I could get 5 copies of this, that might just be one of the best drafts I ever have. Solid B for Grotesque Demise. Up next is Gutterbones. Gutterbones is a single black mana for a 2/1 creature skeleton warrior at rare. Gutterbones enters the battlefield tapped. Pay 1 and a black, return Gutterbones from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only during your turn, and only if an opponent lost life this turn, so it's sort of spectacle, but not. Obviously, this is emulating Gravecrawler and the like, but returning to hand instead of battlefield is a real downgrade. It's still probably fine, and I'd probably still play it in every single aggro deck, and I think a lot of people will start too low on this. A lot of people look at 2/1s or 2/2s for 1 that tap as being like, oh, that's not very good, but it's still pretty darn decent, especially in aggro. I think it's only around the C+ level. It's not enough to move it up to a B- with the return to hand clause part of it, though. C+ for Gutterbones. Always play it if you're aggro. Up next is Ill-Gotten Inheritance. Ill-Gotten Inheritance is 3 and a black for an enchantment at common. At the beginning of your upkeep, Ill-Gotten Inheritance deals 1 damage to each opponent and you gain 1 life. Pay 5 and a black and sacrifice it. It deals 4 damage to target opponent and you gain 4 life. I have no interest in this. It's another bad enchantment. It's better than Curse of the Pierced Heart back from Innistrad, which was just a damage turn. This is a damage a turn and a life gain a turn. But this still costs you a card. It costs you your turn just to get that damage, that 1 damage and that 1 life gain. If you're ahead, cool. You get to win more. Win mores are not the kind of cards you want. If you're behind, this card is not going to get you back into the game. It's not going to do it. And taking another turn off and sacrificing this card that you invested a card slot and 4 mana into to deal 4 damage? Not a fan. Maybe you can side this in. Maybe this is the difference between the Rakdos deck dealing 2 damage a turn or 3 damage a turn and what you need to live long enough or what you need to stop that race, but I don't think it's enough. I've got this at a D-. I don't think I'm ever siding this in, and I'm never intentionally playing this card. D- for another enchantment for Ill-Gotten Inheritance. Up next is Noxious Gerudian. Noxious Gerudian is 2 and a black for a creature beast at common. It's a 2/2 with Death Touch. It's a slightly easier to cast Pitiless Gorgon. It's fine. As I always say, I prefer 1/1 Death Touchers for 1. I don't see the point of a 2/2. It's still going to die to basically everything and trade up really, really well, and I had to pay 2 extra mana for it. It's still fine, though. It's still totally fine, and yeah, it's a solid C, yeah, probably even a C+. I'll play probably the first one of this in every single deck, which does make that a C+. So C+ for Noxious Gerudian. Up next is Orzhov Enforcer. Orzhov Enforcer is 1 and a black for a creature human rogue at uncommon. It's a 1/2 with Death Touch and Afterlife 1. Really, really, really good. 2 mana for a 1/2 Death Touch is totally fine. I prefer my 1/1 for 1 Death Touchers, but this one might actually live if your opponent is attacking with a 1-power creature for some reason. But getting a Spirit when this trades is such a level up from just a Typhoid Rat. I love this. I'll pick it very highly. I'll probably never first pick it, but I've got this at a B- to start, just because it trades up infinitely and leaves you with a creature. A relatively relevant one, too. B- for Orzhov Enforcer. Next up is Orzhov Racketeers. Orzhov Racketeers is 4 and a black for a creature human rogue at uncommon. It's a 3/2. Whenever Orzhov Racketeers deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card. Afterlife 2. So you get 2 spirits off of this one. It's a 3/2 for 5, which is rough. And getting to get a discard when it hits is similarly rough, because how's a 3/2 hitting your opponent on turn 6, unless you're just already ahead, in which case, cool, do whatever you want. Afterlife 2 is decent, because when your opponent blocks, which they will, because this is turn 6, and you have an X2 attacking in, you get 2 1/1s to continue with the attacks next turn, so that's pretty darn decent as well. I'm not excited by this being a 5, but it's probably still a fine C. I'm not going to jump up to a C+ on this, I don't think. Maybe the Afterlife just makes it that, but I'm going to start out on a C for Orzhov Racketeers. Up next is Pestilent Spirit. Pestilent Spirit is 2 and a black for a creature spirit at rare. It's a 3/2 with Menace and Death Touch, and instant and sorcery spells you control have Death Touch. That's interesting. It's like when they got Lifelink from the creature whose name I can't remember, from Khans of Tarkir. Very, 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 very cool ability here. I love it. Turns all of your Rakdos burn spells into actually just unconditional kill spells. Totally sold. Will this work super well in limited? Probably not. How many, great burn spells are you picking up in the average limited deck? Not that many, right? So it is just like a 3/2 for 3 that might have a couple of times where it becomes really relevant. With, of course, Menace and Death Touch, which is an interesting combination, because Death Touch is always a defensive ability usually, but having Menace on it actually means what this does is it trades with the 2 creatures that block it, because you deal 1 damage and kill the 1 creature and 1 damage and kill the other creature. So this is probably just a super solid, totally fine card as a 3/2 Menace Death Toucher. Probably a C. Probably actually a B- at 3 mana. At 3 mana, I would go B- on this. If you can actually take advantage of the ability, that's pretty cool. Probably doesn't ramp it up too much more, because it's going to happen on like 1 or 2 cards in your deck. But B- for Pestilent Spirit. Up next is Plague White. Plague White is 1 and a black for a creature zombie at common. It's a 2/1. Whenever Plague White becomes blocked, each creature blocking it gets -1/-1 until end of turn. I like this. I think I like this a lot. It's very much like Ornery Goblin, although only on attacks, not on blocking itself. But even better, because it shrinks the creature. The X1s still die, just like with Ornery Goblin, although that still isn't a huge change, because of course this has 1 toughness. So yes, a 2/2 becomes a 1/1. But that still just kills this, just like it would kill or trade with an Ornery Goblin. But yeah, this is a fine card. It's very much like Ornery Goblin. Honestly, I think I've actually talked myself slightly down from it being just as good as Ornery Goblin, because this doesn't stop the attacks. But in aggro decks, I think this is still fine. It pretends it's a 3-powered creature, and that can be somewhat frightening, especially for 2 power. So C+ if you are in those aggro decks. If you're trying to hold back a little bit, though, you might not actually even play this, so it might be more of a C-. But C+ for Plague White. Up next is Priest of Forgotten Gods. Priest of Forgotten Gods is 1 and a black for a creature human cleric at rare. She's a 1/2. You can tap and sacrifice 2 other creatures. Any number of target players each lose 2 life and sacrifice a creature. You add black and draw a card. You can choose yourself. I don't know why you would get an afterlife trigger or something, but you're probably not going to pick yourself. You're probably just going to pick your opponent. So a lot happens here, but is it good? I don't think so. Sacking 2 creatures, not including the priest, to deal 2 damage is way too costly. To also make your opponent sack a creature, well, you know, they probably have chaff just laying around to sacrifice. And if they have afterlife, it's even a downside for you, really. You get 2 mana. I don't really care. And I draw a card. I can play Bankrupt in Blood and draw 3 cards for sacking 2 creatures. I'm super not sold on this. I think it actually has some possible implications for constructed aristocrats decks, but I'm not super sold on this in limited. 2 creatures is super costly and basically only okay if they're afterlife creatures. Yeah, just super not sold on this. I'm not going to try this out in limited to start unless some weird wacky deck shows up. So I'm going to start this at like a D-. D- for Priest of the Forgotten Gods. Up next is Rakdos Trumpeter. Rakdos Trumpeter is 1 and a black for a creature human shaman at common. It's a 1/3 with menace. Pay 3 and a red. Rakdos Trumpeter gets +2/+0 until end of turn. It's not great. It's very solidly not great. It's a 1/3 menace, which is not something I really ever want to play. That's not enough power going through, and why does a menace creature need a bigger butt than front? Anyways, and 4 mana to pump isn't that great either. That's asking a lot to get up to a 3/3 menace. A 3/3 menace is okay, but we've put a lot of work into getting this to a 3/3 menace for 1 turn. Still, it is just like a C-. You should probably try your best not to play it. It needs so much mana for it to even be a relevant creature. So C- for Rakdos Trumpeter, and that's in a Rakdos deck. If you're playing this in an Orzhov deck, you should not. C- for Rakdos Trumpeter. Up next is Spawn of Mayhem. Spawn of Mayhem is 2 black for a creature demon at Mythic. It's a 4/4 flying trample. At the beginning of your upkeep, Spawn of Mayhem deals 1 damage to each player, including you. Then if you have 10 or less life, put a +1/+1 counter on Spawn of Mayhem, and it has Spectacle, 1 black. So if your opponent lost life, you actually pay 3 mana for a 4/4 flying trample. Easy bomb. 4/4 flying trample is a first pick right then and there, especially for 4 mana. I'd pick it for 5 mana. I might pick it for 6 mana. Maybe getting it for 3 mana and pinging everyone a turn, basically making this a 5/5 flyer. Getting counters if your life total starts to get too low. Easy A+, always pick this. Snap A+, snap first pick. There's nothing you would ever pick over this card. Pack 1, pick 1. You would possibly pivot in pack 2 if you picked this up and you weren't in black yet. Amazing card. A+ for Spawn of Mayhem. Up next is Spire Mangler. Spire Mangler is 2 and a black for a creature insected on common. It's a 2/1 flash flyer. When Spire Mangler enters the battlefield, target creature with flying you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Feels kind of strange to have a 2/1 flash flyer in black, but that's apparently a new design space they're exploring. Now note this can target itself, so I think a large percentage of the time this card actually just says destroy target attacking creature. You'll play it, you'll make it a 4/1, and it eats most of the cards in the format. If your board state's in a better look, then you could pump a different flyer and block and maybe even just eat the creature and still have this 2/1 flyer left over, which is a relatively solid card. I think I'd pick this relatively highly and play probably just every copy in every black deck in the format. I think it's just a solid B-. Spire Mangler looks very good. Up next is Thirsting Shade. Thirsting Shade is a single black mana for a creature shade at common. It's a 1/1 lifelinker. And of course, like most shades, you can pay to give it +1/+1 until end of turn. But that cost is 2 and a black, which is pricey. Yeah, I don't really like it. 1/1 lifelinker for 1 is not a card I'd ever play. I never played Trained Caracal in Return to Ravnica, and that was correct. The only 1/1 lifelinkers for 1 that I've ever played have had other relevant stuff going on, such as the Amonkhet Cat or the Eidolon from Theros. This doesn't have anything else terribly good going on. For 3 mana, so for 4 mana total, I can get a 2/2 for a turn with lifelink. No, just no. It's a mana sink, and mana sinks are nice, but mana sinks have to be impactful, and this takes a lot of mana put into it to be impactful for a turn. Very, 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 very super cuttable card, because remember, this costs you a card in your deck. You have to put this in your deck, and that costs a lot. C-, just cut this, in fact, no, D+, cut this absolutely as much as humanly possible. It's not good. Up next is Undercity Scavenger. Undercity Scavenger is 3 and a black for a creature ogre warrior at common. It's a 3/3. When Undercity Scavenger enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, put 2 +1/+1 counters on the Undercity Scavenger, then scry 2. This is interesting. A 3/3 for 4 is mediocre. It's a C-, maybe even a D+. You don't play it unless you have to kind of card. The ability changes this a bit. Obviously, if you're Orzovish, or you just have Afterlife in your Rakdos deck, or cards where you get value, or cards that synergize with you sacrificing thing, this jumps up to like a C+ or so. I don't think it goes too much higher. It is still a dumb 5/5, but Scry 2 is not something to sneeze at. We talked about Surveil a lot back in Guilds of Ravnica. Scry is just as good. If you're just sacking any old creature here, I think this is still fine at like a C. And honestly, maybe a Rakdos deck is actually pretty happy with this. They spend turn 2, 3, maybe even 4 attacking with their little 2/1s. And then on turn 4 or turn 5, they play this. They sack their 1/1 or their 2/1 that's no longer relevant. They get a 5/5 and scry 2, and they just get to keep attacking. So actually, I think a Rakdos deck is pretty darn happy with this, which might seem a little bit weird because, of course, sacrifice, well, that's the Orzhov thing. But I think this actually fits better into the Rakdos deck as a way to just keep attacks going, because now you get a 5/5 attacking on turn 5. So I'm going to actually go C+ in a Rakdos deck. In an Orzhov deck, it drops a little bit. It's like a C, C-. So C- to C+, depending on what's going on. Our second last card for today is Undercity's Embrace. Undercity's Embrace is 2 and a black for an instant at common. Target opponent sacrifices a creature. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you gain 4 life. It's an instant speed edict effect. Sign me up. If they're insistent on printing hexproof, then this needs to be in every single set. There needs to be a way to answer hexproof, and this is a way to answer hexproof. Now, these effects still aren't that good, because the average case scenario, of course, is your opponent doesn't just have one single creature on board that you desperately need to get rid of. They typically have more. They play Magic. When you're drafting, when you're building your deck, be it in draft or sealed, you have to respect the fact that your opponent is also going to be playing Magic. Don't forget that. You'll make some bad choices if you forget that. And so edict effects aren't that great. They're typically very good early on. I would not hesitate to just instantly cast this on turn 3 if I have it in my hand and I don't have a way to establish the board, because it's probably going to kill a 2/2 or a 3/3, regardless of if you cast it on turn 3 and it's their only choice, or if you cast it on turn 7 and that's the worst creature they have on the board. So edicts are not a high pick. They are not removal. They look like removal. They sort of feel like removal. They do literally remove a creature, but they're not exactly removal because your opponent is choosing. So this is around a C, maybe a C+, but don't hold on to this. Much like a mana leak or a conditional counterspell like that, it gets worse and worse and worse as the game goes on. So C+, maybe for Undercity's Embrace. Our last card of the day is Vindictive Vampire, and it makes a deck. Vindictive Vampire is 3 and a black for a creature vampire at uncommon. It's a 2/3. Whenever another creature you control dies, Vindictive Vampire deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain 1 life. This turns on the Aristocrats deck in Limited. This effect in a format with sacrifice effects and potential value from the sacked creatures means a very fun deck exists. The problem is, you do need this creature for that deck, preferably 2. And remember, the average draft pod typically has just under 1 copy of any given uncommon. Getting 2 of these it'll happen, but it's not a common thing to happen. I'll be taking this way too highly and trying to get into that deck, but it is really kind of a build around. If you don't have the sacrifice outlets, preferably repeatable ones, this is a little bit more mediocre, like a C-, because you are paying 4 mana to get a 2/3, and then the triggers are kind of happening at your opponent's whim. It's your opponent deciding to kill your creatures. It's your opponent deciding to block your creatures or attack into your creatures. Your opponent's kind of in control of when you're getting these triggers. But if you control those triggers because you have sack outlets, then I think this does jump way up to like a B-B range. So it's very build around. The grade is very dependent on who's in control of these triggers happening. If you are not in control of it, then this does drop to kind of like a C or even C- card. So keep that in mind, and boy, do I want to draft this deck. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for the black set review today. We've got another A+ here. I think actually every color might have an A+ this time around. And stay tuned for tomorrow for a rare double A+ video. But yeah, black looks really decent. There's a lot of Bs kicking around here. There's of course the build around sacrifice deck, of which black is a part of. It could be black-white. There's a potential for a black-red one, and there's a potential for a Mardu one. I'm super excited to play black cards in this format. It looks really, really fun. And of course there's bad enchantments, because apparently Ravnica Allegiance is all about bad enchantments. Let me know what you think of all the cards in black. What cards are you excited to play? What cards do you agree with me, disagree with me, etc.? Chat with me, chat with each other down below. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at @TheManaLeek. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. You can find me at Facebook.com/TheManaLeek, Twitch.tv/TheManaLeek, where I will be streaming a free Wizards event that they have sponsored me, given me access to Ravnica Allegiance a day early, along with 370 other streamers. So you can go check that out. And of course, on the 17th, I'll be doing another stream with the Inked Gaming playmat giveaway. And if you do want to get your own playmat or anything else, they sell board games now. They sell board games. They sell all kinds of stuff now. Inkedgaming.com. Use the promo code MANALEEK10, all one word, 10 is the number, to get 10% off your order. If you like the content, click that thumbs up button. Click subscribe if you want to see more. And if you do have questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you all tomorrow for the red set review. And like I said, double A+ video.